everyone, and welcome to the Process Pros for another week. Today with me, I have Julia and I have Sam. Now, Julia and Sam have previously worked together at another company, and they've been really instrumental on how that company's gone about building out, a process center of excellence and innovation within that organization from the ground up, and really like building it into the part of their culture in terms of continuous process improvement. So today we want to explore that topic a little bit, and on that I want to say I've been doing process improvement for a long time in various different forms, whether it be business analysts or in the development of the processes. It's always really difficult to get started, and getting that buy-in from whatever stakeholder it might be, whether it's the CIO or the CEO or just the manager, in terms of who's got some clout in the organization. Because it's I suppose it's probably better to say it's easy to get started, but having that snowball effect where you can actually then continue on with the success of your small wins is always really quite difficult to just keep building on the momentum. So uh, over to you guys. How did you get started? How did you first identify what needed to be done, and how did you go about it?
Yeah, I think you were right a little bit too when you say that it's challenging to get started too, and just because it seems easy, but um, really you have to have a really good plan in place before you get started if you want to make lasting, changes, and if you want to make the process improvement initiative last. And I think, Sam and I, we really started with a plan, kind of a three-pronged approach of looking at C-suite and executive buy-in. You want to look at a middle management layer of buy-in, and then you want to look at the individual contributors and the rest of the company. And your message to each group, we kind of discovered, is going to be a little bit different. And the way you do approaches to each of those groups is going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, and it's important that those messages all, as Julie said, they're all complementary and they build on each other. We found that in doing so, we were able to help sort of shift the language of process improvement at the company, and make it from sort of this thing that no one really wanted to do, or certain pockets were only doing, to it just sort of fell into the day-to-day jargon as well.
Right. So yeah, I guess those one of those real things, right? If it ain't broke, why fix it? So how do you go about changing that mindset in certain users? I've certainly come across the people within an organization where it's like, hey, this works just fine. I can sign this document, I can print it out, I can put it in a filing system. How do you go about, I guess, getting some of those stakeholders on board with those, I guess, processes to say, hey, there's probably a better way we can do this, just because this is the way we've done it forever, and it's not broken. We could do it better, so you've got more time to do X. So how are what are some of the strategies, I guess, you used or you could use to sort of get around some of those hurdles?
Yeah, a big one that we found that received a lot of success, especially for those if it's not broke, why fix it one, was just start documenting what you're doing. Um, a lot of folks think things work great in their heads, and it's sort of been that tribal knowledge for quite some time. But when you start documenting, you get to start to see the ineffectiveness of some steps, some places for where you can start building in automation. It really helps lay it bare for all folks to see, so that they can move forward with optimizing their processes.
Yeah, that initial reaction some people have, like, it's going fine, there's no issues. If you just start to scratch the surface, you'll uncover, right, that there are issues. And like Sam said, one of the best things you can do is say, well, let's just map the process, right? You say it's going fine, that's great. Let's map it out, right, so that the next people that come down the line can follow the same process if it's going great. And you find in the act of mapping the process, right, and there's never just one person involved. There's multiple people, multiple groups, sometimes many departments. You find as you go through that process that maybe this one person says, yeah, it's fine for me. But there are potentially upstream or downstream lots of issues or bottlenecks or problems with the process that they didn't even notice, right? or they will start to uncover like, actually, yeah, there are frustrations. Like the more you ask them questions, like, yeah, it goes fine, but you're right that this step actually is frustrating now that I'm writing it out and I can see how many steps it actually takes, right? So you find in the process of just making people work through their process and tell you how it works that you're going to uncover issues pretty much 100% of the time. And another great approach too is to just say, you know, okay, it feels like it's going great to you. That's good. Let's look at the data, right? And if they're already collecting data somehow on their process, that's good. You can look at that. If they're not, you can set something up, right, to make sure, well, let's look at how your process is actually running, right? And what are the numbers and what kind of cycle times and lead times and other metrics can we look at to verify, you know, if you say it's going great, let's verify that. So that's another approach.
Yeah, that process mapping and socialization, I think, was where we found a lot of our wins as we would get things documented and then socialize it out from sort of the insular little group that thought it was just their process to more and more folks on outside of that team. We found that there was a lot more tendrils of other users out there needing to have input into those things.
Right. So I guess, yeah, what you're saying is that the documentation is key, pure and
Yes.
simple.
Pure and simple.
And that's not, you know, automating anything. That's just getting it down, whether it be on a napkin across a table or, you know, in a system of record like a ProMap or something like that, where you're documenting the process. Now you can eyes on that process to show, you know, I guess the key stakeholders just what is actually involved. And certainly, as probably a lot of people can identify with, is when you look at a process, especially when you're looking at a process from a C-suite level, right? They just see a process and it gets done. You know, somebody in that department does that process.
Yep.
And sometimes what they don't understand is that somebody has to go and talk to 5 other people that do some subtasks, and those 5 people have 2 or 3 people underneath them that do some subtasks that all roll back up into this other one person that apparently is the person that does that process.
Yeah.
Now, what happens if somebody along that train gets hit by a bus, you know, as the old saying goes? What happens to that process? And I think a lot of those details are really lost when things aren't documented. And when you see, you know, critical processes fall apart when someone leaves an organization, whether it be through you know, they're moving on to another career, or you know, they retire and take all that systems knowledge with them. And a lot of the time, a lot of the people in the higher in the chain don't understand exactly what that person was doing in the broader scheme of things, because it's just not a known thing.
Yeah, and not only is it the individual contributor knowledge that gets lost. I know the one of the big things that we found very important with using a system like ProMap was the ability to tie systems back into those processes to help our IT and information systems teams have a better understanding of what systems were being used where and how. And that really shone a lot of light on those things. So we could see, hey, a process is going to be impacted by, let's say, this server upgrade, or, you know, these guys are having a hard time, and that's maybe because there's not an automation piece in place. So yeah, it's I mean, it's kind of a twofold there, if not more.
Yeah, the great thing about a tool like ProMap, and I would say, you know, anybody doing some kind of process improvement initiative, you need some kind of tool that's going to make things visible, because like you said, Dan, the C-suite, the upper level management, they don't have the visibility into, you know, the inner workings of these processes. So you absolutely have to have something, some kind of system that's going to make the process visible. ProMap is great because, like Sam, not only does it make the process visible, it's going to make the technology involved visible, and the people involved visible, and the roles involved. All of that needs to be surfaced in some way, right? And that's really step one. Get it documented, understand the full picture. From there, right, you can move to now we can do some data analysis, and now we can do some real process improvement because we understand the whole picture.
Right, and that's the thing. Like, it's that disconnect between a process and a like, say, a workflow. A process could be, walking down the street and putting something in, in the mailbox. That's something you're not going to automate relatively quickly and easily, but it's still part of the process, and that still needs to be documented because someone still needs to walk down the street and put that piece of paper in the letterbox, regardless of how that piece of paper comes about. Um, yeah, that's really interesting. And so, in terms of, I guess, for anyone out there who's listening and wants to, who is struggling, right? We've all been there. We've been in those boats where you can see massive opportunity within your organization and you want to help and you want to make things better. What's a strategy or what's something that someone can do quickly and easy for some quick wins to, really get that, to start that momentum? Because it's good and well to go and find that process that is super meaty and it's going to be super meaningful and it's going to be, really revolutionary in the organization. But those ones normally take a lot of buy-in. They require a lot of stakeholders. They require a lot of work, and they also provide, or they not provide, but they also give you a lot of risk. So if that big meaty process that could revolutionize the organization fails, you're going to have a hard time picking yourself back up, right? And then getting back into trying to do it. So I guess would one of the I guess key steps to just getting started would be to, pick some small fish, like get some really good quick wins under your belt. And then socialize that, as you were saying, Sam, like really socializing that, making yourself, an evangelist within your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to pick those low-hanging fruit items out there, just for getting the experience yourself, as well as the experience to the rest of the enterprise of what to expect out of either your team or whoever's doing the process improvement initiative, so that they can see what they're going to get out of it when they start playing ball as well. And then actually, like you said, Dan, over communicate. I think that's one of the things that we did well is we over communicated, what we were doing, how we were winning, and that sort of stuff going forward. And I think that helped us gain traction.
Yeah. And I mean, you definitely do not want to start with your biggest cross-functional process, maybe with your biggest intractable problems in the organization, because like you said, Dan, that's going to be, it's going to be a slog. And if people don't have kind of a memory of having done it with some quick wins, it's not going to work out. So you want to start with a non-cross-functional process, right? Just go department by department if you're trying to do an organizational-wide, enterprise-wide process improvement. Work with your individual departments, I would say, first, right? And find the non-cross-functional processes they're involved in, because usually those are going to have some quick wins, like you say, and you're going to be able to quickly identify process versus people versus technology problems. And you can quickly say, this is a process issue. And, here's a really obvious thing we could pull out for automation and improvement right away. Right. Start with those. And then, like Sam said, make sure you're messaging that to the organization. So as soon as those improvements get made, find a mechanism to tell people about it. But also, just as you do that with each department, those people who have been involved in that improvement, it's exciting to them. They're going to be excited. And when they start to hear about bigger initiatives, they're going to want to participate. They're going to want to be involved because they've seen it work right in their own department. So that's really what you want to focus on there.
Yeah.
Now, in your experiences, I guess what are some of the, probably not pitfalls, but what are some of the major blockers that you saw, like, as you're trying to instigate and implement this change within the organization of how you go about a process mindset? What were some of the blockers that you got, and from what levels of the business as well?
Oh yeah, sure. So I think Julia would agree with this as well. One of our biggest areas that we had a difficult time reaching and being successful with was the middle management layer. We had great buy-in at all of our executive level, that senior leadership team level, and we had a lot of excitement at the individual contributor level. We had people seeing what we could do for them and to make their jobs easier and more effective. But it was somehow lost in translation in that middle layer of the chain of command there, and we weren't getting that traction with that level of management.
Yeah, and I think it was, and it's not that there wasn't interest from the middle management layer. I think, though, at that level, a lot of those folks are so very, so busy and overwhelmed with just the day-to-day management of their groups and their organization. The challenge was kind of overcoming this mindset. Like, they're already putting out fires, right? Every day, left, right, and center. It's kind of this idea of like, I don't have time to sit down and document this and go through this exercise that may or may not be, I'm not sure I'm going to see dividends on this, and I've got real fires to fight. And that's valid, right? That's something that you have to really work to overcome and kind of get the message across of like, we understand that, but if you do take the extra time now, right, those fires that you're fighting now, there won't be as many of them in the future. So you really, we kind of realized as we went along, we really have to hone in on that message. And I think a lot of it too is if you have the ability and you have the resources to do it, having sort of a central process improvement group that can help facilitate with those managers, like that would be key, right, to overcoming some of that, right? Because they're really busy people, and they don't always have, or they don't always perceive that they have the time to do some of these process mapping and process improvement activities. So if you can get in there and assist them, right, and say, hey, I'll facilitate the session for your team, I'll provide you templates. If you've got a tool like ProMap, right, this is making it really easy for your team. There's already some templates available, right? Anything you can do to kind of bring them along is really, really going to help your cause.
And where we saw some gains in that layer was from the managers who made it part of their team's BG&Os or OKRs for their staff of, hey, you need to participate here, and we're going to start measuring that. And once we started getting that level of traction, it really did help bring the rest of the groups along.
Yeah. If you can get it baked into the existing kind of reporting structure of the company already, right? And the existing recognition systems of like, hey, you guys documented a process, great job. We're going to recognize you for that, right? Or we're going to make it one of your objectives for the quarter or whatever that is. If you get it baked into those regular rhythms, you're going to have a lot bigger chance of success there too. And I would say that's really, especially the recognition piece, I think is really important if anyone's trying to do this. Right. The process improvement initiatives are not, or at least the work of doing process management it's not a sexy project, right? It's an ongoing discipline. And it's tempting. I think a lot of managers and management, you recognize people for kind of the big one-off, like the firefighting activities, right? It's like, great job. But we really tried to emphasize, like, you want to start shifting the recognition from that to recognizing the people who have discipline to the process and discipline to process management, because that's going to bake the behavior into the culture as well.
Yep.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic. One of the excuse me. One of the things that I guess from my time, like probably more on the building of automation and process management and whatnot, there were certain departments that I guess were more into it, for a better word. Did you guys see that as well, in terms of that particular organization where, hey, IT you think is kind of the department that would be all over it, but they're normally not, and it's normally your HRs or your finance team, and then they all crop up different challenges in terms of, with human resources, you've got lots of privacy concerns around what is being shared organizational wide and what is documented, what's not documented. And within finance, you got some of the same things, but they're also very busy as well with close and month ends and taxation and audits and all those kinds of things. So I guess, did you see a particular department really champion process improvement?
Yeah, we did. The industry where we worked, they definitely had a couple of groups that sort of mindset was baked in based upon what they were doing. So they took to it like a fish to water, and they really did help us champion it through the rest of the organization.
Right, right. And were there departments that were less opposed?
I would say that they were, but I think that's kind of goes back to what Julie was mentioning earlier, is that they were already so busy. One extra thing on their plate, no matter what it was just one thing too many.
Right. So it wasn't so much the mindset
Yeah,
of,
and I think
hey,
that's again,
we don't need to we don't need to fix anything. We're just too busy to fix it.
Yeah.
and I think again that's kind of where the customized approach to each department matters. Like you said, when you're working with a finance department, for example, you really have to keep in mind the month end and activities, and don't schedule your meetings with them at the end of the month, right? Like a lot of it's customized. But also just again, especially for the groups that are a little more resistant for a variety of reasons, finding quick wins for those teams is really important, right? Doing something quickly right off the bat, like automating a piece of their process or finding something that's going to make their lives easier right away, is key to getting them on board, right? If they see it work right off the bat, they'll be more willing to continue on that journey with you.
Yeah,
Awesome.
the other part that we had a good win for some of those reluctant departments too was pushing the fact that it didn't need to be perfect out of the gate. Just get it written, get something down and captured, and then evolve it from there. And once they started to see that they didn't need to have a work of art right out of the gate, they were way more happy to jump in and help support.
Right. And that's the thing. Like, when you're documenting the process, you're not trying to fix it. You just need to, let's put it down on paper, what happens now. And then over the course of time, we can have small wins on that particular process and evolve it over time. It doesn't need to just happen next week, right?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks very much, guys. This has been really insightful. We've come a time. I made a promise that I'd actually do a plug for the How To Center. So for all of those you were listening, Sam's team looks after the How To Center, which you can find on, I think it's community.nintex.com, or is there a URL for it?
Yeah, it's howto.nintex.com.
Awesome. And you'll find hundreds of little how-to videos across the Nintex platform. Go and consume them. I think they've also got a feedback there where you can request particular how-tos if you're looking to do anything across the Nintex platform as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dan.
No worries. And on that, I'll sign out and see you next week.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.